My sister excluded me from her wedding but invited all my friends, who got revenge for me. For as long as I can remember, my life has revolved around taking care of my younger sister, Jenny. I, Lisa, have always been the responsible sister, while our parents were constantly busy with work. Since childhood, I was tasked with helping her with homework, accompanying her after school, and entertaining her. Jenny was always an energetic and curious child, which meant I was always on alert, trying to keep her safe and satisfied. Despite the love I had for my sister, the responsibilities that fell on me were often overwhelming. My parents, well-intentioned as they were, saw my dedication as natural and never acknowledged the effort it required from me. Our parents were often absent, immersed in their demanding jobs, and expected me to take on the role of caregiver. Every afternoon after school, instead of enjoying time with my friends, I was at home helping Jenny with her schoolwork, preparing snacks, and ensuring she was entertained and safe. It was an endless cycle that, in my young mind, seemed like an eternity. Social events were particularly difficult. Birthdays, friends' parties, and any other social occasion always came with the imposition of bringing Jenny along. "Lisa, you need to take your sister. She can't stay home alone," our parents would say. Over time, Jenny's constant presence began to affect my social interactions, becoming a burden I could hardly bear. But how did this family dynamic affect our relationship in the future? Continue reading to discover how the responsibility of taking care of Jenny impacted my social life and shaped the bond between us. If you like following stories, reports, and surprising revelations seen on Reddit, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. As we grew up, Jenny's quirks became increasingly challenging. She often said inappropriate things, without any filter, and caused embarrassing situations. I always tried to correct her behavior, but the frustration grew as my attempts seemed futile. Jenny's actions began to directly affect my social life, creating a barrier between me and my friends. One of the most memorable episodes happened during my best friend Clara's birthday. Clara had planned an elaborate party, and all our friends were there. Jenny, as always, was with me. During the gift opening, Clara received a beautiful necklace from a mutual friend. Without thinking twice, Jenny loudly commented, "That looks like something you find at a bargain store." The ensuing silence was deafening, and I felt the heat of embarrassment rise in my face. Clara, visibly hurt, tried to hide it, but the damage was done. The look of disappointment on her face was unmistakable, and everyone in the room felt the tension. Another incident occurred during a Christmas party at school. Jenny insisted on coming with me, despite my pleas to my parents to leave her at home. During the party, while everyone was exchanging gifts, Jenny started loudly complaining about how bored she was and that she wanted to go home. "This is so boring. I don't know why you wanted to come here," she said, her voice cutting through the festive atmosphere like a knife. Once again, I felt the weight of judgment from my friends and classmates. They looked at me with a mix of pity and frustration, and I knew my reputation was at stake. These incidents began to accumulate. Every time Jenny said or did something inappropriate, I was seen not only as the older sister but as responsible for her actions. My friends started to distance themselves, and I felt increasingly isolated. The social life I so desired was being destroyed by Jenny's behavior. One day, during a gathering with friends at the park, Jenny decided it would be funny to throw mud at one of the girls who was with us. The girl, dressed in new clothes, started crying, and I felt completely powerless. "Jenny, why did you do that?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She just shrugged, without any remorse. "It was boring. I wanted to do something fun." These constant situations left me exhausted. I wanted to have a normal social life, but increasingly, that seemed impossible. My friends started to stop inviting me to events, knowing that Jenny would probably be with me and cause some trouble. "Lisa, it's better if you don't come today. We don't want any drama," Clara would say, trying to be kind, but her words cut deeply. Worst of all was the lack of support from my parents. When I tried to explain to them the impact Jenny was having on my social life, they minimized my feelings. "Lisa, you need to be more patient. Jenny is still young and learning," they would say, as if that justified everything. The frustration turned into resentment, not only towards Jenny but also towards our parents, who seemed incapable of seeing the situation from my perspective. The social pressure kept increasing. I began to avoid gatherings with friends and decline party invitations, simply because I didn't want to deal with the consequences of Jenny's actions. I felt like a prisoner in my own life, with no space to be myself or enjoy the things any teenager should enjoy. Anxiety began to dominate my days, always anticipating the next disaster Jenny would cause. How will Lisa deal with Jenny's constant inappropriate behavior? And what will be the reaction of their parents? Continue reading to find out. The conflicts with Jenny and my growing frustration began to deeply affect my relationship with our parents. Every time I tried to discuss Jenny's behavior and its impact on my life, I was met with indifference or, worse, reprimand. Lisa, you need to be a good sister. Jenny depends on you, our parents would say, blind to the reality of our dysfunctional family dynamic. The breaking point came after a particularly embarrassing event. Clara had invited our family over for dinner at her house. It was an important night for me, a chance to show my friends that my family life wasn't as chaotic as it seemed. During dinner, Jenny, bored and seeking attention, decided to imitate Clara in a grotesque manner, mocking her expressions and way of speaking. Clara was visibly uncomfortable, and I could see the anger and frustration in my friend's eyes. When I asked Jenny to stop, she just laughed and continued, increasing everyone's discomfort. When we got home, I was furious. Why do you never discipline Jenny? She ruined the evening. I exploded, my anger and frustration finally boiling over. My parents looked at me with disapproval. Lisa, you're overreacting. Jenny is just a child. You need to be more understanding, my mother said, as if I were the villain in the story. The anger boiled inside me. She's not just a child. She's destroying my social life. You never do anything to correct her behavior. I shouted, feeling the tears of frustration stream down my face. My father shook his head, disappointed. Lisa, you need to stop being ashamed of your sister. She needs you. This emotional manipulation, the constant gaslighting, made me question my own sanity. My parents twisted reality, making me believe I was being cruel and unfair when all I wanted was a bit of peace and normalcy. Every time I tried to express my feelings, they were minimized or ignored. You're overreacting, Lisa. Jenny didn't do anything wrong, they would say, as if my concerns didn't matter. The isolation grew. I began to feel a profound sense of loneliness, as if I were carrying a burden that no one else could see. Nights became torture, with constant thoughts of frustration and helplessness. I felt betrayed by those who should support and protect me. The relationship with Jenny deteriorated rapidly, turning into a spiral of resentment and anger. Attempts to explain my perspective were constantly frustrated. Mom, Dad, you don't understand how much this affects me. I don't have a social life because of Jenny. I pleaded, hoping they would listen this time. Lisa, you're being selfish. Jenny needs you more than your friends, my father responded, as if my needs were irrelevant. The frustration and despair led me to question if things would ever change. Every day, I felt more suffocated by the responsibilities and expectations my parents placed on me. The anger and resentment towards Jenny grew, but I also began to feel deep sadness for her. I realized that, in many ways, she was also a victim of our parents' emotional neglect. The emotional manipulation from my parents became increasingly evident. They twisted my words, made me feel guilty for wanting a life of my own. You're being ungrateful, Lisa. We're doing the best we can, they would say, as if I were being unfair. I felt lost, unable to escape the web of manipulation my parents wove around me. One day, after yet another confrontation, my mother used a particularly cruel tactic. Lisa, you know your grandmother always said you were the difficult child. Maybe she was right, she said, her words piercing my heart like a knife. I knew my grandmother always had a special affection for Jenny, but hearing this from my mother was devastating. The feeling of being unloved or unvalued intensified, and I began to lose hope that things would ever improve. The situation reached its peak when one day, after yet another social incident caused by Jenny, I decided to confront my parents definitively. I can't live like this anymore. You need to see what's happening. I shouted, my voice full of desperation. You need to learn to be a better sister, Lisa, my father responded, his voice firm and unyielding. It was then that I realized the only way to find peace and happiness was to distance myself. I decided I needed to seek my own independence, to fight for my freedom. I began to study even more intensely, determined to get a scholarship and leave home. The dream of a better life, away from the toxic environment my home had become, gave me the strength to continue. The desire for freedom became my primary motivator. I knew the only way to escape the emotional manipulation and cycle of frustration was to build my own life, free from the influence of my parents. I began planning my escape, preparing for a future where I could be myself, without the constant shadow of Jenny and the manipulation of our parents. How will Lisa react to this constant emotional manipulation? And how will this affect her relationship with Jenny and her parents? Continue reading to find out. Rebellion and independence. There came a time when I could no longer bear the demands of my parents and Jenny's behavior. I decided I needed to rebel against the role that had been imposed on me. I started refusing to take Jenny with me to my social activities. Mom, Dad, I need time for myself. Jenny can't be with me all the time, I declared, firm in my decision. This period of rebellion was crucial for my independence. I began dedicating more time to my studies, determined to secure a scholarship that would allow me to leave home. I spent hours in the library, studying and preparing for exams. My parents, initially disappointed, began to realize that I was determined to follow my own path. When I finally received the scholarship, I felt a mix of relief and excitement. Moving to a distant university represented a new life, a chance to break free from the responsibilities and expectations that held me back. The farewell was difficult, especially with Jenny, who didn't fully understand why I was leaving. But I knew I needed this time for myself. University life was a breath of freedom. I made new friends, explored personal interests, and began to discover who I really was, outside the shadows of my sister and the demands of my parents. However, the distance also brought a new perspective on my family and the dynamic I had left behind. How will this new freedom affect Lisa's relationship with Jenny and her parents? And what will happen when she returns home for the holidays? Continue reading to find out how this journey of self-discovery and independence will shape Lisa's future and her family. University life brought the freedom and independence I had longed for. However, this peace was temporarily interrupted when I returned home for a school reunion. My parents insisted that I take Jenny, but this time I stood firm in my decision. No, Mom, Dad. Jenny doesn't need to be part of every aspect of my life. This reunion is important to me, I argued, hoping they would understand. At the reunion, I reconnected with friends and teachers. Everything was going well until, suddenly, Jenny appeared. She had followed on her own and was now there, in the middle of the reunion, with an innocent smile, completely oblivious to the discomfort she was causing. My friends exchanged uneasy glances, and I felt the pressure of all eyes on me. Lisa, why didn't you bring Jenny with you? Clara asked, clearly trying to be polite, but the tension was palpable. Jenny, noticing the attention, began loudly talking about trivial things, causing more embarrassment. I was torn between anger and frustration. Why did my parents allow this to happen? And how could I handle this interruption without hurting my sister? These thoughts swirled in my mind as I tried to remain calm. How will Lisa handle this unexpected interruption? And what will be the reaction of her friends? Continue reading to find out. The school reunion became the setting for a confrontation that had been building for a long time. I could no longer contain my frustration. Jenny, you can't just show up everywhere. You need to learn to respect others' spaces, I said, my voice louder than I intended. My friends were surprised, but many of them knew the challenges I faced with Jenny. Clara, beside me, placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. Lisa is right, Jenny. Sometimes you need to understand boundaries, she said, trying to ease the tension. Jenny's parents, however, didn't take long to react. "How can you humiliate your sister like that?" my mother asked, visibly furious. My father shook his head in disapproval. "She just wanted to be with you, Lisa," he said, as if my frustration was completely unjustified. I stood my ground. "It's not fair to me. I love Jenny, but she needs to understand she can't always be in my personal space. She needs to learn about boundaries. How will this confrontation affect the relationship between the sisters and with their parents? And what will be the consequences of this family dispute?" Continue reading to find out. Years passed, and I was finally getting married. Planning the wedding was an emotional challenge, especially with my parents insisting that Jenny be invited. I knew her presence could cause discomfort and distraction on a day I wanted to be special. "Lisa, you can't leave your sister out of your wedding," said my mother. But I was resolute. "Mom, Dad, Jenny has always been an important part of my life, but this is a day I need to be perfect, without incidents." My fiancé, Mark, supported me completely. "Lisa, it's your day. If you think it's better without Jenny, I'm on your side," he said, firm in his support. Deciding not to invite Jenny was painful, but I knew it was the right decision for me. But how will Jenny react to this exclusion? And what will be the reaction of the family? Find out in the next chapter. Years later, it was Jenny's turn to get married. To my surprise, she invited all my friends, but not me. The exclusion was a painful blow, but also understandable given our complicated history. My loyal friends decided to get back at Jenny for me. They showed up in ridiculous outfits, turning what should have been a special day for Jenny into a spectacle of mockery. "This is for Lisa," Clara said with a mischievous smile as she posed for photos in a ridiculous straw hat. How will Jenny react to the sabotage of her wedding? And how will Lisa deal with the accusations? Continue reading to find out. The sabotage at Jenny's wedding led to a major confrontation. She blamed me directly, despite my friends confessing it was their idea. "This was your fault, Lisa. You can't just walk away and think everything is okay," she shouted, tears of anger in her eyes. Supported by Mark, I stood my ground. "Jenny, I had nothing to do with this. My friends made that decision on their own. But this constant conflict needs to end. We can't continue like this." I decided to cut Jenny out of my life for good. "Jenny, I wish you the best, but I can't have this negativity in my life anymore. I hope you find happiness and peace, but I need to distance myself." How will this decision affect Lisa's future and her relationship with her parents? Feeling the weight of years of family conflict and emotional manipulation, I started therapy. This process helped me deal with my trauma and better understand the dysfunctional dynamics of my family. Therapy gave me the tools to rebuild my life in a healthy way. Mark and I focused on building a better life for our future family, away from the negative influences of the past. Therapy not only helped me heal but also gave me the strength to forgive, even if I couldn't have Jenny or my parents in my life. I learned to set my boundaries and take care of myself. My journey wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And as I moved forward, I knew I was on the right path to a happier and healthier future. If you enjoyed following this story, don't forget to leave a like, and if you want to follow more stories, reports, and surprising revelations seen on Reddit, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. It will be a pleasure to have you with us.